Okay, so you know how you sent me that post from Steve Rhode, the get out of debt guy?
Yeah,
I think we need to like really dive into this one
for sure.
because this is important stuff.
Absolutely.
Steve's been helping people with their, debt problems since 1994. So
Right.
he's seen it all. He's seen every trick in the book.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience with this stuff.
Exactly. And today we're going to look at one of the things that he's broken down, which is a Chase Visa cardholder agreement.
Okay.
Document COL00095.
So this is like the fine print that nobody reads.
Yeah, it is. But it's also like why
Yeah.
we're doing this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to know what you're getting into.
Exactly. And Steve's really good at kind of highlighting what's actually important in there.
Yeah. And how many times have we all just clicked agree,
Oh, yeah. Countless times.
without even knowing what we're agreeing to?
Especially online, right?
Especially online, yeah.
It's just like, okay, yeah, whatever, next.
Click, sign me up.
Yeah. Get me to the thing I want.
Right, exactly. So this deep dive is really about understanding this Chase Visa card agreement,
Okay.
so you can avoid some nasty surprises.
So no, like, gotchas hidden in there that we're
Okay.
going to find out about.
Exactly, like fees and disputes and just like, all those things that you don't want to have to deal with.
Right. You don't want to find out about those after you've already signed.
Right, exactly.
So we're taking a proactive approach.
Proactive, that's what this is all about.
I like it.
All right, so this agreement, CRL0000095, covers a non-rewards version of the Chase Bank Visa card.
Okay. Standard everyday card?
Everyday card. Maybe you use it for balance transfers. Maybe they advertise some kind of flexible payment options.
Right.
And the issuer, of course, is JP Morgan Chase Bank NA.
Okay. The big guys.
Yeah, one of the big guys.
All right. So where do we start with this?
Well, Steve starts with something that might seem really basic, but it's super important, and that is card ownership.
Okay. Ownership. So who's actually responsible?
Right. And the agreement's super clear about this. You, the primary cardholder, you are responsible for all the charges.
Okay.
Even charges made by authorized users.
So even if you give your kid a card or something.
Exactly. So you might think, oh, I gave my kid a card, so they're responsible for their charges, but legally,
Right.
you are the one who's ultimately responsible.
Gotcha. So you're on the hook for that.
Yeah, you are on the hook.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right, so next up, let's talk APRs.
All right. APRs, annual percentage rates.
Yeah, the interest rates you're going to be charged.
Right. This is where it starts to get a little bit complicated.
Yeah, this can be confusing.
But it's really important.
So first we have the purchase APR.
Okay.
And this agreement lays out a variable range from 19.24% up to 28.24%. So that's a pretty big potential swing.
Yeah, that is a big swing. And variable, that means it's not fixed, right?
Exactly. It means it can go up or down.
And it's usually tied to something like the prime rate.
Right. The prime rate is like a baseline interest rate that a lot of lenders use. And your APR will be a certain percentage above that prime rate.
Okay, so if the prime rate goes up, my interest rate on this card could go up too.
That's exactly right. It's something to definitely keep an eye on.
Especially if you're carrying a balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that's purchases. Now, what about cash advances?
All right, cash advance APR. This is where Steve really raises a red flag.
Okay, why is that?
Well, the rate jumps up to 29.24%.
Okay, so that's already higher than the highest purchase APR.
Right. But it gets worse because interest starts accruing immediately.
So there's no grace period.
No grace period with cash advances.
Wow, okay.
Steve compares it to a high-interest pawn shop.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually.
It is. It really paints a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So cash advances are really for like emergencies.
Yeah, like short-term emergency situations.
And I guess the credit card company's taking on more risk, so they're charging more for it.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
just be aware of that.
Okay, so we've covered purchases, we've covered cash advances. What about balance transfers?
All right, balance transfer APR. This is actually the same as the purchase APR. So 19.24% to 28.24%.
Okay, so same range.
Same range, but Steve makes a really important point here.
What's that?
Don't assume you're going to get some kind of low introductory rate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen those advertised a lot.
Yeah, you see those 0% APR for like 12 months or whatever.
Right.
But this specific agreement doesn't guarantee any of those promotional periods.
So you might transfer your balance thinking you're getting a great deal
Right.
and then end up with the same APR you had before.
Yeah, or even worse.
Ouch.
So just read the fine print very carefully.
Okay, good advice.
And then there's the penalty APR.
Penalty APR. Okay, what is that all about?
This is the one Steve marks with a big X.
Okay, that sounds serious.
This rate can go all the way up to 29.99%.
Wow, almost 30%.
And it can be triggered by something as simple as a late payment.
Just one late payment?
No, a payment that bounces.
Okay.
And the worst part is it can stick around indefinitely.
Indefinitely so, like forever?
Pretty much, yeah.
So you're basically stuck with that high rate.
Yeah, one little slip up could cost you a lot of money in the long run.
That's a scary thought.
It is. So be very careful with this card.
All right, noted.
Okay, let's move on to the grace period.
Grace period. Okay, this is like the free time you get before interest starts accruing.
Right. But there's some catches.
There are always catches with these things.
Always. So this agreement offers a 21-day grace period.
Okay, that sounds decent.
It is, but it only applies to purchases.
Only purchases, okay.
And only if you pay your entire balance in full each month.
So if I carry over even a small balance from the previous month...
You lose the grace period.
Okay, so it's all or nothing.
Pretty much. And Steve also points out with a big warning symbol that there is no grace period for cash advances or balance transfers.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that. Interest starts accruing immediately on those.
Immediately. So those are definitely things to avoid if you can.
Unless it's a real emergency.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what about payments? How do those work?
All right, so let's talk about payment allocation and how your payments are applied.
Okay, how does that work?
If you only make the minimum payment,
Right.
that money will go toward the balance with the lowest interest rate first.
Okay.
Any extra amount that you pay above the minimum, that will be applied to the balance with the highest interest rate.
Okay, so they're kind of trying to help you out a little bit there.
Yeah, they are in a way, because if you're paying more than the minimum, you want that extra money
Right.
to be working on the debt that's costing you the most.
That makes sense.
All right, so what about the minimum payment itself?
How much is that?
Well, the base amount is $40 or more.
Okay.
But here's the catch. Any past due amounts,
Like what?
accrued interest fees, all that stuff,
Okay.
that gets added on top of that minimum.
So it can go up pretty quickly,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
especially if you miss a payment.
Especially if you miss a pay.
So that minimum payment isn't really a fixed number then?
No, it's not. It can change from month to month depending on what you owe.
Gotcha. So it's really the absolute bare minimum.
The bare minimum, and it'll keep you out of trouble.
Right.
But you'll end up paying a lot more in interest over time.
Yeah, because you're basically just dragging that debt out.
Right, exactly.
Okay. What else do we need to know about?
Well, late payment fees are another thing to be aware of.
Late payment fees, how much are those?
Those can be up to $40.
Okay, that's not insignificant.
And Steve points out that there's this 2 strikes in 6 months rule.
2 strikes in 6 months. Okay, explain that.
So if you have 2 late payments
Uh-huh.
within a 6-month period,
Right.
they will automatically hit you with that maximum $40 fee.
Ouch. So they're really trying to discourage late payments.
Yeah, they are for sure.
Okay, makes sense.
And now we're getting to something that Steve flags as a really major concern,
Okay, what's that?
the arbitration clause.
Arbitration clause. All right, what's wrong with that?
Well, this clause basically means that by agreeing to this cardholder agreement, you're giving up your right to sue Chase in a regular court.
Oh, wow, okay.
If there's a dispute,
So I can't take him to court.
well, you can't unless you specifically reject this clause.
I have to reject it.
Yeah, you have to reject it in writing
In writing?
in the first 60 days after you open the account.
Okay, so it's like an opt-out thing.
Yeah, it's an opt-out thing.
And if I don't opt out, then I'm stuck with arbitration.
Right, and arbitration takes place outside of the court system.
Okay, so it's like a private judge or something.
Yeah, something like that. And the outcomes can be less predictable.
Less predictable, so it's not necessarily in my favor.
Not necessarily. So that's definitely something to think about very carefully.
Okay, I'm making a note of that.
Or good.
What else is in this agreement?
Well, another thing that Steve points out is account closure.
Account closure. Okay, what about that?
The agreement says that Chase can close your account
Hmm.
at any time.
For any reason.
For a wide range of reasons,
Well,
like looting, simply not using the card for a while.
So even if I'm paying my bills on time,
Even if you're paying your bills on time,
they could just close my account.
they could close your account because they say it's part of their business needs.
Wow. Okay, so it's not really my account then.
It's not really your account.
It's their account that they're letting me use.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so I shouldn't rely on this card being there forever.
You should not rely on that at all.
All right, I'm seeing a pattern here.
There's definitely a pattern.
Okay, what about rewards? Does this card have any rewards?
Well, for this specific agreement, COL00000095, the answer is no.
No reward.
No rewards, no points, no miles, no cash back.
All right, so it's a pretty basic card.
It's a very basic card.
Okay, so I'm not getting anything back for using it.
You're not getting anything back.
Fair enough.
All right, let's talk about the dispute process.
Dispute process. Okay, so what if I see an error on my bill?
Well, the agreement is very clear about this.
Uh,
If you want to formally pursue a legal dispute,
Right.
You have to submit your dispute in writing.
In writing.
Calling them on the phone is not enough.
So I can't just call them up and complain.
You can call and complain,
Right.
but it won't be considered a formal dispute.
Unless I put it in writing.
Unless you put it in writing.
Okay, so always get it in writing.
Always get it in writing.
Good advice.
And finally, let's talk about the fees.
Fees. Okay, there are always fees.
Always fees. So on the plus side, there is no annual fee with this card.
Okay, that's good.
However, if you use this card for purchases in a foreign currency,
Right.
you'll be hit with a 3% foreign transaction fee.
3%. Okay, so that can add up if you're traveling?
It can add up, and for both balance transfers and cash advances,
Sure.
there is a 5% fee.
5%. So again, that can be a significant chunk of money.
It can be, so just be aware of those fees.
Okay, noted.
All right, so Steve then walks through some really helpful what-if scenarios.
What if scenarios? Okay, I like these.
Yeah, they really kind of bring it all to life.
Yeah, make it real.
So first, what happens if you miss a minimum payment?
Okay, we talked about this. You could get hit with a late fee.
Right up to $40.
But even worse, you could get that penalty APR.
Exactly. And remember that penalty APR can stick around forever.
Right, so missing a payment can really come back to bite you.
It really can.
Okay, what's another scenario?
All right, what if you take out a $100 cash advance?
$100 cash advance.
Steve says you'll immediately owe at least $5 in fees.
Okay.
Plus that 29.24% interest starts accruing right away.
No grace period.
No grace period. He even puts another big X there for emphasis.
Yeah, he's really hammering that point home.
He is. It's like his high-interest pawn shop analogy.
It is, you're basically paying a premium for that immediate cash.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, one more scenario. What if I just don't use the card at all?
All right, so let's say you don't use the card for 6 months.
6 months, no spending,
No spending.
but I'm still paying my bill on time.
You're still paying your bill on time.
What happens then?
Well, Chase can still close your account.
I could just close it.
They can close it because they say it's part of their business needs.
Wow, so they can just take it away from me?
They can take it away from you,
Even if I'm a good customer?
even if you're a good customer.
Okay, so I really shouldn't rely on this card for anything important.
That's probably a good idea.
All right, so after all of that,
Mm-hmm.
what's the verdict on this card?
Okay, so Steve kind of sums it all up in what he calls red flags and landmines.
Red flags and landmines,
I
okay.
like that. Yeah, so he reminds us about that really high penalty APR.
Right, the 29.99%.
The arbitration clause that you need to actively opt out of.
Right, got to send that letter in writing.
That's right. No grace period for cash advances and balance transfers.
Better.
That pesky foreign transaction fee.
Uh-huh.
And what he calls the we can change anything at any time clause.
The we can change anything at any time clause. What does that mean?
Well, basically it means that Chase can modify the agreement down the road whenever they want.
And not necessarily in my favor.
Not necessarily in your favor.
Okay, so they can just change the rules of the game.
Pretty much, and they don't even have to tell you about it.
Wow, that's not very consumer friendly.
It's not. So these are really the things that you need to be aware of.
Okay, the red flags and landmines.
Exactly. So given all of this, Steve gives this Chase Visa card agreement
Okay.
a consumer friendliness score of use with caution.
Use with caution.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not a complete avoid at all costs,
It's not an avoid at all costs.
but it's definitely proceed with caution.
Yeah, because it does have some potential benefits.
Like what?
There's no annual fee,
Right.
and they advertise some flexible repayment options.
Okay.
But the penalty rates are really high,
Right.
and the arbitration clause is a big concern.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So Steve's warning is basically this: if you slip up, this card can become really expensive really quickly.
Okay, so you got to be on top of your game with this card.
You really do.
All right, I'm seeing that.
Now, there's also some stuff in this agreement about Chase pay over time and my Chase loan.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
So basically, these are options to either break down big purchases into monthly installments
Okay.
or to get a direct loan deposited into your bank account.
Okay, so it's like a loan, but through your credit card.
Exactly. But Steve's really careful to point out
What's that?
that these are not like those 0% APR promotions that you see sometimes.
Okay, so there's a catch.
There's always a catch.
There's always a catch.
So these options, they come with fees,
Fees.
sometimes up to 1.72% of the purchase amount per month,
Okay.
or a fixed APR.
So you are paying interest on these?
You are definitely paying for the convenience.
Yeah, there's no free lunch.
Steve says there's no free ride here.
No free ride.
Exactly. So just be aware of that.
Okay, so what if I'm already in trouble with this card? What do I do?
Well, Steve actually offers a cardholder survival plan.
Like cardholder survival plan. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so his first piece of advice is reach out to Chase immediately.
Okay, talk to them.
Talk to them and ask about any hardship programs they might offer.
Okay, so see if they can work with you.
Exactly. He also stresses the importance of always paying at least the minimum amount due
Right, to avoid default.
to avoid default. Put any disputes in writing.
We talked about that.
We talked about that. Steer clear of cash advances.
Right, because those are expensive.
Very expensive. And regularly check your credit reports.
Okay, so you know where you stand.
Exactly where you stand. And finally, if this Chase Visa card just doesn't sound like a good fit for you,
Right.
Steve has some advice on what to look for in a better credit card.
Okay, what should I be looking for?
So he says, look for a card that offers a 21+ day grace period
21+ day grace period.
on all purchases.
On all purchases.
Not just some of them.
Right.
No penalty APR.
No penalty APR at all.
At all low, or ideally no fees.
Okay.
Transparent rewards programs.
Transparent so you know what you're getting.
Exactly. And rewards that don't disappear if you miss a payment.
Oh, yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen that before where you miss a payment and then your points are gone.
Yeah, it's not good.
Not good at all.
And finally, strong dispute resolution processes
Okay.
with human customer service.
Human customer service, that's key.
It is because you want to be able to talk to a real person.
Yeah, when you have a problem, you don't want to be dealing with a robot.
Nobody wants to deal with a robot.
Okay, so those are all good things to look for.
Yeah, those are all good things to keep in mind.
So Skee's really laid out a lot of good information here.
He has, and he actually includes a really helpful table in his post.
A table. Okay, what's in the table?
It summarizes the key terms from this Chase Visa agreement,
Okay.
and it provides plain English explanations of everything.
So it's like a cheat sheet.
It's like a cheat sheet.
Nice.
So, for instance, it clearly outlines the purchase APR range,
Okay.
that much higher cash advance APR,
Mhm.
potential penalty APR,
Right.
the limitations of the grace period,
Mhm.
the fact that you have to opt out of the arbitration clause in writing,
Okay.
Chase's account closure policy,
Mm-hmm.
the need for written submissions for the dispute procedure,
Right.
and the fact that there's no rewards program with this card.
Wow, so it's all right there in plain English.
Yeah, it's all right there. It's super helpful.
It is very helpful.
So, this deep dive into the Chase Visa card agreement, COL, AM000095.
Right.
It really highlights several key areas that you need to pay close attention to.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here.
So just recap that potentially very high penalty APR,
Yeah.
the arbitration clause, and the fact that you have to actively reject it, the
Mhm.
fact that cash advances are super expensive
Right.
because of the immediate interest and fees,
Yeah.
and the limited grace period that only applies to purchases,
Right. Not to everything.
not to everything. So these are all things that you need to know
Absolutely.
before you use this card, or even if you already have it.
Yeah. It's important to understand what you're signing up for.
Exactly, because it could save you a lot of money and stress down the road.
Yeah, the fine print matters.
It really does.
We should all be reading the fine print.
We should all be reading the fine print. And you know what it makes you think about all the other agreements
Right.
that we've clicked agree on over the years?
Without actually reading them.
Without actually reading them.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that too.
We're all guilty of it. So maybe this is a good reminder to take a closer look at what we've actually agreed to.
Yeah. Good advice. And if you need real help with your own debt situation,
Talk to Damon at damonday.com.
he's the guy to call.
He is the guy to call.
All right. Thanks for this deep dive.
Thanks for being here.